On the afternoon of November 26, 2025, residents of Hong Kong's Tai Po district looked up to witness something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Towering columns of flame, 32 stories high, were consuming the apartment complex where thousands of people lived. The fire had started on the bamboo scaffolding wrapped around one building, but within minutes, it was leaping from tower to tower, racing up the exterior of the structures faster than anyone could have imagined possible. Burning debris rained down on the streets below. Thick black smoke blotted out the afternoon sun. And inside those buildings, trapped behind windows sealed with plastic and foam for renovation work that had been going on for over a year, elderly residents were making desperate phone calls to loved ones, unsure if they would ever speak to them again. At least 55 people have died in the fire, and 279 people are still missing. The death toll is now the highest in a Hong Kong fire since 1948, when 176 people were killed in a warehouse blaze. Among the dead is a firefighter who had been called to the scene from nearby Sha Tin Fire Station, a 37-year-old named Ho Wai Ho, who was a 9-year veteran of the Hong Kong Fire Services Department. He arrived shortly after the fire was reported and lost contact with his colleagues around 30 minutes later. His body was discovered with burn injuries to his face. He died trying to save others. This is the story of what we know so far about Hong Kong's deadliest fire in nearly 8 decades. It is a story still unfolding, with hundreds of families waiting for news of loved ones, investigators sifting through evidence, and a city demanding answers about how a routine renovation project turned into a catastrophe of historic proportions. The questions being asked cut to the heart of construction safety, corporate responsibility, and whether the systems meant to protect ordinary people failed them when it mattered most. Wong Fuk Court sits in Tai Po, a long-established suburban district home to about 300,000 people near Hong Kong's border with mainland China. The estate is a 41-year-old subsidized home ownership housing complex with 8 residential blocks, each 31 stories high, containing nearly 2,000 units. It is part of Hong Kong's public housing framework, home to working-class families who waited years for the chance to own an affordable apartment in one of the world's most expensive property markets. According to the 2021 government census, there were 4,643 residents in the complex. What makes the demographics of Wong Fuk Court particularly tragic is the composition of its residents. Roughly 36% of residents were 65 or older, according to property data that uses the city's government figures. This was a community of retirees, of grandparents, of people who had lived in these towers for decades and planned to spend the rest of their lives there. A Tai Po district council member told local television that most of the residents trapped in the fire were believed to be elderly people. These were the most vulnerable members of the community, the ones least able to flee down 30 flights of stairs when flames began consuming their homes. A 2016 building inspection found that the estate required mandatory large-scale repairs. The complex was aging, and its exterior walls needed significant work. In January 2024, the Owners Corporation presented 3 repair plans, with costs ranging from HK$150 million to HK$330 million. The HK$330 million plan was selected, entailing completely rebuilding the exterior walls and setting paving stones. Each unit owner would contribute between HK$160,000 and HK$180,000 toward the renovation, a substantial sum that represented years of savings for many families. The work began, and at the time of the fire, the exterior wall repairs were still ongoing, with all 8 buildings being surrounded in bamboo scaffolding and fencing. The renovation was already running behind schedule. One resident pointed out that the exterior wall renovation was now over a year late, having been scheduled for a May completion. For more than a year, residents had been living inside buildings wrapped in green mesh netting, bamboo poles, and plastic sheeting that blocked their windows and obscured their view of the outside world. One displaced resident said that due to the recent renovation work, Many windows outside the apartments were lined with plastic or polystyrene and scaffolding. "I couldn't even tell you if it was sunny or raining until I left my building," she said. November 26, 2025 was a dangerous day for fires in Hong Kong. The weather was dry, and the Hong Kong Observatory had issued a red fire warning. The Hong Kong Observatory had been warning of fire risk that week due to dry conditions. "The fire danger warning is red and the fire risk is extreme," read a warning posted Monday that was still in effect. The conditions were perfect for a disaster, though no one knew it yet. The fire began on Wong Cheong House and was first reported around 2:51 p.m. At first, it seemed like a manageable situation, a fire on external scaffolding, something that could be contained. But what happened next defied all expectations. The emergency alert was raised from a 1 alarm to 4 by 3:34 p.m. and to the highest level, 5, by 6:22 p.m. This was a 5-alarm fire, only the second such classification since the handover of Hong Kong in 1997. The speed of the fire's spread was terrifying. Flames surged 32 stories in just 5 minutes at Wong Fuk Court, leaving residents facing a fierce struggle against a 20-minute evacuation time. A building expert explained the horrifying math. The time for people to evacuate from a 32-story building is essentially very slow. It takes at least 10-20 minutes, but the fire spread to the top in 5 minutes or less. Within hours, the fire spread to a minimum of 4 blocks within the estate, starting when Wong Chung House's external scaffolding ignited, then quickly spreading to nearby buildings. Footage from the scene showed bamboo scaffolding outside several flats of the building engulfed in flames, with burning sections of green scaffolding mesh falling to the ground. By evening, 7 of the 8 blocks were ablaze, their exteriors transformed into vertical rivers, a fire visible for miles. The fire could be smelled from 500 meters away. Residents across Tai Po watched in horror as the towers burned. The smell and taste of smoke from the deadly Wong Fuk Court fires became palpable across Hong Kong's Tai Po district. The response was massive. There were 128 fire trucks, 57 ambulances, and 767 firefighters deployed to the scene. Firefighters deployed more than 140 fire trucks and more than 60 ambulances to the scene. Eventually, more than 1,200 fire and ambulance personnel were mobilized. But the firefighters faced conditions that made rescue operations extraordinarily difficult. Fire chiefs said high temperatures at the scene made it difficult for crews to mount rescue operations. Firefighters trying to reach people trapped on upper floors of the burning buildings faced extremely high temperatures and falling debris. The human stories emerging from that afternoon are heartbreaking. Wong, a 71-year-old man, was photographed in tears outside the burning building, claiming his wife was trapped inside. His anguish captured in that image speaks for hundreds of families who spent that night not knowing if their loved ones were alive or dead. Chan Kwong Tak, an 83-year-old retiree living in the community, told the South China Morning Post that the fire alarms failed to go off when the blaze broke out, even though the buildings were equipped with them. If someone was sleeping then, they were done, he said. Tai Po's former district councilor also told the outlet that residents reported not hearing the fire alarms go off, even after they detected the smell of smoke. He said they were only warned when a security guard knocked on their doors, giving them little time to get out. Mr. Ho, a 65-year-old resident of Block 1, heard a fire alarm in his building at around 3 p.m., and when he looked outside, he saw Block 6 on fire. He immediately left his apartment on the 11th floor, taking nothing with him. He was one of the lucky ones. He said that after half an hour, Blocks 5 and 7 caught fire, then Block 4, and eventually Block 1. On Thursday morning, wrapped in a microfiber towel given to him by a nearby shelter, he looked up at his apartment and expressed pessimism over the eventual death toll. "I don't doubt many elderly people, cats, and dogs are still in there," he said. Harry Chung, 66, who has lived at Block 2 for more than 40 years, said he heard a loud noise at about 2:45 p.m. and saw fire erupt in a nearby block. "I immediately went back to pack up my things," he said. I don't even know how I feel right now. I'm just thinking about where I'm going to sleep tonight. Another longtime resident, a woman surnamed Chu, said she still had not been able to contact her friends who live in the next block. After staying over at a friend's place on Wednesday night, the 70-year-old came back to see her home still burning. I've given up thinking about my property, a resident who only provided her surname, Wu, told local television. Watching it burn like that was really frustrating. Ms. Wang told reporters that she was grateful her family were not at home when the fire broke out. She said the most precious items she lost in the fire were photographs, her children's certificates, and electronic devices. These are the irreplaceable things, the markers of a lifetime, gone in an afternoon. Mrs. Deng, 68, said Wangfuk Court was an ideal place to raise her growing family of 4, after her husband won the public housing ballot that allowed them to buy a unit in the complex. That was more than 20 years ago, and her kids have since married and moved away. But she remained living at the apartment in Block 4. She returned from a dance class Wednesday afternoon to see Block 6 consumed in flames. After a few hours, the other buildings started catching fire. All I've done is watch my home burn to ashes. Looking at the devastation, she said, "It's difficult to imagine going back to living at the estate even if repairs are done. It all seems corrupt." Over 1,000 residents were evacuated to a nearby shopping center. About 900 residents were spread across 8 shelters. Social welfare organizations and churches across the district opened their doors to the displaced. The Hong Kong Red Cross sent staff to temporary shelters to provide materials and first aid services and started a mental support hotline. As the fire burned through the night, investigators began asking difficult questions about why it spread so quickly and so devastatingly. The answers they are finding point to serious concerns about the materials used in the renovation. Hong Kong Secretary for Security, Chris Tang, said the fire spread in an unusual manner, and a criminal investigation has been launched. Tang said that waterproof tarpaulins, protective nets, and plastic sheeting burned far more violently than compliant materials, with flames spreading more rapidly around the 31-story blocks. Officials said they suspect construction materials found at the apartments, including protective nets, canvas, and plastic covers, failed to meet safety standards. These polystyrene boards are extremely inflammable, and the fire spread very rapidly, Director of Fire Services Andy Young said. Their presence was unusual, so we have referred the incident to the police for further inquiries. Police said styrofoam materials were also used to seal windows during the renovation, likely worsening the situation. Police said they found foam materials that are highly flammable outside the windows on each floor near the elevator lobby of the one unaffected tower, believed to be installed by a construction company. The company at the center of the investigation has been identified. The materials were installed by Prestige Construction and Engineering Co. Limited. Police officers searched the housing estate's building maintenance company on Thursday morning, seizing documents that mention Wangfuk Court. We have reason to believe that the company's responsible parties were grossly negligent, which led to this accident and caused the fire to spread uncontrollably, resulting in major casualties, said Eileen Chung, a Hong Kong police superintendent. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter in relation to the deadly blaze, 2 directors and a consultant of a construction company. Officers arrested them in the Tai Po, Ngau Tau Kok, and San Po Kong districts at about 2 a.m. on Thursday. The 3 men arrested, aged 52 to 68, are the directors and an engineering consultant of the firm. Beyond the criminal investigation, Hong Kong's anti-corruption agency announced it had set up a dedicated task force given the significant public interest in this matter. The ICAC pledged to conduct a thorough investigation into potential corruption related to the major renovation project at Wangfuk Court. The renovation project cost $330 million, approximately $42 million US dollars. Questions are now being asked about where that money went and whether corners were cut that cost lives. The disaster has also reignited debate about one of Hong Kong's most distinctive construction practices: bamboo scaffolding. Bamboo scaffolding dates back to at least the Han Dynasty, around 2,000 years ago, and has been used to build some of the city's tallest and most iconic skyscrapers. Hong Kong is one of the last places in the world where bamboo is still widely used for scaffolding in construction. On mainland China, where use of bamboo in construction originated from ancient times, scaffolding is now mainly metal. The tragedy is that warnings about bamboo scaffolding had already been raised. On March 17, 2025, the Development Bureau of Hong Kong issued a circular requiring that, from March 21, 2025, all public works tenders must specify the use of metal scaffolding. The Bureau cited bamboo's intrinsic weaknesses, including inconsistent mechanical properties, susceptibility to deterioration, and high combustibility, as key reasons for the change. Hong Kong's government moved to start phasing out bamboo scaffolding in March, citing worker safety after 22 deaths involving bamboo scaffolders between 2019 and 2024. It announced that 50% of public construction works would be required to use metal frames instead. Though fire hazard was not cited as a reason for the phase-out, there have been at least 3 fires involving bamboo scaffolding this year, according to the Association for the Rights of Industrial Accident Victims in Hong Kong. But the phase-out came too late for Wong Fuk Court. The renovation began before the new requirements took effect, and the complex remained wrapped in the same combustible materials that authorities had identified as dangerous. Hong Kong leader John Lee told reporters that the government is going to inspect all bamboo scaffolding in the city in the wake of the deadly, ongoing blaze. The Development Bureau is already meeting with the Construction Bureau to discuss that metal scaffolding will be used instead of bamboo scaffolding, Lee said. A building expert explained why the fire spread the way it did. The cause of the fire is not so critical because the building is designed to handle random fire incidents, but it is not designed to handle such a fast fire, spread outside the building and eventually spread back into the building. An expert in fire safety engineering said there were similarities with the devastating 2017 Grenfell Tower fire in West London, which killed 72 people and was blamed on firms fitting the exterior with flammable cladding. The lesson from Hong Kong, one expert wrote, is not that bamboo is inherently good or bad for scaffolding. It's about context. It has clear advantages for small-scale, short-duration work. But the science behind fire and the realities of high-rise living now demand a tighter line. Use the right tool for the job, and when the risks climb, switch to non-combustible systems. The firefighter who died, Ho Wai Ho, has been mourned across Hong Kong. Fire Services Department Director Andy Young said Ho had been a firefighter for 9 years. All of our colleagues are deeply saddened by the loss of such a devoted comrade. Civil Service Secretary Ingrid Jung praised Ho's gallantry and selfless devotion to duty, and said officials will make every effort to help the family of Mr. Ho during this sad and difficult period. The Indonesian consulate said 2 of the people killed and 2 of those injured were Indonesian nationals. All of them were foreign domestic helpers employed by Hong Kong residents to assist with housework and caregiving. These were workers far from home, earning money to support families back in Indonesia who lost their lives in a disaster they could never have anticipated. The political ramifications of the fire are already being felt. Authorities will consider postponing the December 7th legislative election, with all campaigning now paused. Election forms have been suspended, and political parties have paused campaigning until further notice. Chinese President Xi Jinping expressed his condolences and sympathies to the victims' families. Xi designated 2 million yuan, approximately $282,000, to Red Cross emergency assistance and urged all-out efforts to minimize casualties and losses. Hong Kong leader John Lee has ordered inspections of all public housing estates undergoing major renovations. The government has immediately arranged for inspections of all housing estates across the city undergoing major repairs to examine the safety of scaffolding and building, Materials, he wrote on social media. The support for victims has been substantial. Chinese tech giants Xiaomi and Tencent, as well as apparel conglomerate Anta, announced donations totaling $6.4 million to Hong Kong in support of victims. Hong Kong's banking industry has been urged to help those affected access funds, with HSBC announcing emergency measures to support the victims and their families. As of Thursday evening Hong Kong time, the fires across all 7 buildings in Wang Fuk Court are basically under control, John Lee said, though isolated pockets of fire continue burning through apartment windows. About 500 people are using 9 emergency shelters, and 250 doctors and 250 other medical professionals have been set up in medical centers at these temporary shelters. We are experiencing a collective pain, Lee said at a news conference. At this difficult moment, we need to face it with strength and get through this hard time together. But for the families of the missing, the ordeal is far from over. Outside one of the shelters set up for affected residents, a woman carrying her daughter's graduation photograph searched for her child. This image captures the agony of not knowing, of hoping against hope, of clutching a photograph because it might be all you have left. The investigation into what happened at Wang Fuk Court will continue for months. Questions about the construction company, the materials used, the oversight of the renovation project, and potential corruption will be examined by multiple agencies. Criminal charges may follow. Civil lawsuits are likely. Regulatory changes are already being discussed, but none of that will bring back the people who died on November 26, 2025. None of it will restore the homes that burned, the photographs and certificates and irreplaceable memories that turned to ash. None of it will give back the years of life stolen from elderly residents who should have been safe in their homes. What happened at Wang Fuk Court is a tragedy that was, by all early indications, preventable. The warnings about bamboo scaffolding were known. The risks of flammable materials on building exteriors were understood, not least because of the Grenfell Tower disaster 8 years earlier. The phase-out of bamboo in public construction had already begun. And yet, thousands of people continued living inside buildings wrapped in combustible materials, trusting that someone was ensuring their safety. That trust appears to have been misplaced. As one displaced resident put it, surveying the ruins of her home of 20 years, it all seems corrupt. The final death toll is not yet known. 279 people remain missing. Families are still waiting, still hoping, still searching through lists of the injured and the dead for the names of the people they love. The investigation is ongoing. The full story of what happened at Wang Fuk Court and who bears responsibility for it has not yet been told. But what we know so far is damning. Enough. A renovation project meant to repair aging buildings instead turned them into death traps. Materials that should never have been used on high-rise residential structures were installed on all 8 towers. When fire broke out on a dry, windy day with extreme fire danger warnings in effect, those materials burned with a ferocity that outpaced any possibility of escape for the elderly residents trapped inside. 55 people are confirmed dead. A firefighter gave his life trying to save others. Nearly 300 people remain unaccounted for, their fates unknown. And a city that prides itself on modernity and safety is being forced to reckon with a disaster that looks increasingly like the result of negligence, corner cutting, and a system that failed to protect the vulnerable people who depended on it. This story is not over. The fires may be coming under control, but the search for answers and the search for justice is just beginning. Hong Kong will remember November 26, 2025, as the day the sky over Tai Po filled with flames and smoke, the day towers meant to shelter families became vertical infernos, the day a community was destroyed in hours. And as the investigation continues, as arrests lead to charges and charges lead to trials, as the questions about corruption and negligence are answered or left hanging, The people of Wangfuk Court will be rebuilding their lives, mourning their dead, and asking the question that haunts every survivor of preventable tragedy. How was this allowed to happen? The answer to that question will determine whether the deaths at Wangfuk Court lead to meaningful change, or whether they become just another entry in the long catalog of disasters that shocked the world for a moment and then faded from memory. The families of the dead deserve better than that. The residents who lost everything deserve better than that. And the city of Hong Kong, which now must confront the failures that made this tragedy possible, deserves answers. This is what we know so far. The full truth is still emerging from the ashes.